Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with some pink, red, black cards. Technically Valentine, technically not. Open-ended, as always. I really loved this week's Color Throwdown Challenge, so I wanted to do another card or two using the colors. Plus I just wanted to experiment. I had a rough idea in the back of my head, and then I just wanted to play. And that's what I was doing here. I started with just some Arches cold pressed watercolor paper, and I was just spraying water and spraying Distress Oxide sprays, and then kind of blotting it up and seeing what would happen. That's it. Just simple. So makes a big old mess, but it's fun. So I was using KITSCH Flamingo and Candied Apple Distress Oxide sprays. I had heavily sprayed the watercolor paper with water. The nice thing about the Arches cold pressed watercolor paper is it can handle a lot. So you can do all kinds of things with it. So I did some spraying. I tried splattering some water, even though I kind of knew you're not going to get a lot with the water reactiveness in that sense, because these sprays were already heavily covered with water and all that stuff. But once I was happy with it, which was, just sprayed them, dried them. They're extremely warped because I didn't tape them down or anything. They're very warped. This is one way to deal with that. Another way, if you don't have a MINC machine or a laminator, you need something hot. You could also put things like this in between a couple pieces of just copy paper and run it through your die cut machine so that the pressure from the die cut machine will flatten them as well. The only thing with this, using something like this as a MINC machine, I had it on the max heat setting. You don't want to put in a background that you've done any heat embossing on, because this will remelt that embossing powder and it will squish it and it will ruin it. It will, transfer the embossing powder to the plastic carrier sheet, so you just want plain backgrounds, So that's all I did. I just ran them through my MINC machine and that heat flattened them out nicely. So then I wouldn't have to fight with them as much, because I wanted to, stencil them and then adhere them and all that stuff. So that all, and it also helped to fully dry them because, again, the heat. So after I'd done that, I used Honeybee Stamp's Whimsical Hearts stencil, and I just held it in place. I didn't bother taping it down. I was literally just flying by the seat of my pants. Again, I had a rough idea in the back of my mind, what I was aiming for, but I was also just playing and experimenting at the same time. So I used the stencil and just one of my palette knives and just regular, just white embossing paste, nothing fancy. I have had this embossing, it still amazes me that this embossing paste has not dried out. I have had this for years, years. I've got little chunks in it that have dried out that I need to kind of pick out of there. But it still works. And yeah, well, I'll just keep using it until I use it up. So I did that on those backgrounds, let that dry. So it just gives it that texture. And then I pulled out just some scraps of white cardstock. And then I'm using the SWAK, SWAK stamp. It's just this set of lips, SWAK sealed with a kiss, from Honeybee that I've had sitting here for weeks now. Pulled that out, and I'm stamping it onto the smooth white cardstock with the same colors. So KITSCH Flamingo, and then I'm going to do Candied Apple Red, Distress Oxide inks. And I use my mini MISTI for this because with both of them, I'm double stamping because I want, a real, a lot of ink, really solid. Plus I wanted lots of ink stamped because I'm going to coat these with just clear embossing powder. I have just regular clear detail powder, but honestly, chunky, I don't know what happened to my clear, chunky embossing powder. I had some, I know I did. I don't know where it went. Anyway, that would have worked really nice with this too because I want, glossy. You could double stamp if you want, heat emboss it like this, stamp it a second time, heat emboss again, build up layers. I've shown that in a recent video too. I didn't bother. I just used the clear embossing powder, and it did give that nice glossy effect. So I had done that twice with the pink, and then I'm going to repeat this process with the Candied Apple Red Distress Oxide ink. So same process. I've got my scrap of white cardstock. I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool. And then I'm going to stamp that lip image twice with the Candied Apple Red Distress Oxide. Flip around the cardstock, stamp it a second time, and then, a third time. And then once those are coated with the clear embossing powder. I will melt that with my heat tool. Once all of these lips are done, I will die cut them. There's a coordinating wafer die, so I will run these through my die cut machine and die cut all of these lips. And then after I die cut these, I also die cut some white and some pink and some black cardstock using the Honeybee Smooch wafer die. So I die cut, of course, the actual word multiple times from white cardstock because it's just force of habit with me. I like 3 layers for word wafer dies. It gives the dimension I love. So I die cut the word from white cardstock, and I'm going to stack those layers together just using my craft tacky glue. Once I have 3 layers of the white word, the outline I die cut from some pink cardstock from my stash. So then I will adhere the word to the outline, and then I die cut the second outline that has all like the piercing detail. It kind of shows up in the video, not really. You can see it in the finished photos though. It's got like a piercing detail all around the perimeter. So that I die cut from black cardstock. So then I'm going to adhere that, and then I'm just going to repeat the process. And then also using my little die pick to remove any little blobs of glue that happen to go out. I don't add a whole lot of glue. Like I use my craft tacky. I apply it mostly just to the thicker areas of these die cuts. Like I don't apply the glue to everything because it's just not necessary. I just apply it to the widest areas and just I'm usually doing little tiny dabs, little tiny, swirls of glue, not a whole lot because not much is needed. So again, once all those words are stacked together, I adhere them to the outline, and then I adhere the outline to that black outline die cut. So then those are done. And then to finish off the sentiments, I'm using sentiments from the coordinating Smooch stamp set. As always with Honeybee stuff, there's like, a bunch of random sentiments to build phrases, which is what I love, because then it just gives you options. So I chose a couple of the sentiments from that set. This time working on some red cardstock. And again, got my MISTI. I lined up the 2 stamps I wanted to use, lined them up straight. I use my anti-static powder tool, stamping these with clear embossing ink. And then these I'm going to heat emboss with just some detail white embossing powder. And I flipped the cardstock around and repeated that. So then I'll have sentiments for both my cards. I'm going to melt those with my heat tool. And then I will trim these out just off camera. I just trimmed them out with my paper trimmer. I also did the same thing with several more sentiments, which I'll use on the inside of the card. You can kind of see that pile there off to the right. So I will use those on the inside of the card, but it was just more sentiments from that same stamp set. And then, of course, I also wanted to add some baker's twine. So I just wrapped some baker's twine around my background. And then I start my knot and I use my reverse tweezers. Absolute must-have. Same thing. I've had these reverse tweezers for years. I have a second pair because one always grows legs and, decides to walk off half the time. And then I'll find it randomly somewhere in my little office. But yeah, hold that knot with the reverse tweezers, and then I just tie a knot with the baker's twine, remove the tweezers, pull it tight, and then I'm good to go. So I've got my baker's twine, and then I'm just going to start adhering everything to this card front. So I'm using just some thin 3D foam squares and my craft tacky glue to adhere all these little elements to my card front. So I've got my 2 different colors of smooches, and then I've got my sentiment. I'm going to pop that up with a little bit of the 3D foam squares as well. This also helps because I'm adhering on top of that dried embossing paste that I'd used over the stencil. So either a good liquid adhesive or things like foam tape, foam squares, etc. Similar idea to when I use glitter paste. You need some good, strong adhesive. So either a liquid glue or things like foam squares really help to just kind of adhere everything really well. So I have my card fronts done. On the inside of the card, I'm doing black card bases. Just A2 card bases for both of these. And when it comes to black card bases, when it's time to write to the recipient, I just use a gel pen. You could line the inside with a piece of white cardstock. That would work as well. I just left it black because I wanted to stamp these lips with the Oxide ink on the black. I just like the look. Plus the sentiments are really going to pop. So I stamped the lips with those same Oxide inks, the Candied Apple Red and KITSCH Flamingo. And then all the little companion sentiments, I had heat embossed onto the same red and pink cardstocks using that same little Smooch stamp set. So the inside of the cards will say, consider this a paper hug, and then XOXO. So did that to both of these cards. Just adhered them, purposefully wonky because it's just easier. Especially when you're adhering multiple pieces. It's like purposely put them tilted. You know, one, it's interesting visually, and two, it just saves you the headache of trying to line them all up. So I adhered those, and then I'd put Scotch foam tape on the back of these panels just to pop them up and give them some extra dimension. So peeled off the backing off of the foam tape, and then I can press this onto my card base, and that finishes off these cards. I didn't add any bling. I technically didn't add any splatter. I know, kind of crazy, because I didn't really do that in my last video either, but trust me, it's coming. It's coming. I just thought I had a lot going on with these. I got the you know, the texture and the gloss and all that fun stuff. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list. I'll link to everything that I use, so you can check that out in the description box below the video if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting. I very much appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.